Krista.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
I got to go on this little tiny short couch here. Excuse me.
It works, just your size.
So you run Girl Above.
I do.
Tell me about that.
So Girl Above was started 3 years ago as a result of a little bit of my story and working with high school and middle school aged girls and just realizing a lot of the brokenness that they had in their lives and in their families' lives, and recognizing we have a situation culturally on our hands when it comes to teenagers. And Girl Above is a nonprofit organization that aims to speak truth and life into them, into their identity, into their confidence, and really combine in a realistic way discipleship with mental health. So that's what we're doing. And we work with families to help them navigate the teenage years that can be angsty, if anything.
So what do dads need to know about raising their daughters?
Dads have so much that they need to know. I think sometimes having a teenage daughter is really scary because of the level of emotion. And you're not sure, like, can I step into this space? Is this just a space for mom? What does that look like? And I would challenge every dad to get extremely involved in the life of your teenage daughter and your son. But when it comes to girls, they're going to get their affirmation, their love, their approval from something, from someone. And if it's not you, as a dad, as a father, then who's it gonna come from? It's gonna come from the boys at school, the boys online. They're going to find it. And at the end of the day, they wanna know that they are loved and cared for by their dad. Dads have so much influence and can speak deeply into the heart of a girl when it comes to value, when it comes to worth, when it comes to boundary. Like, you are the trainer of those things. It's either you training her or a 15-year-old boy. What would you rather have? So that would be my advice to dads. We recently did a social media training about how social media affects teenage girls, and what I loved to see were the dads in the back of the room just like scribbling down notes, because they just didn't realize how much girls have this like deep need for affirmation and for love. And so that, I think, shocked them.
What about the dads out there who say, I've already screwed up. My daughter's 18 or 19. I made a mess of things. Does he have a chance to?
He absolutely has a chance, and that's part of my story. When I look at my relationship with my dad and how things have changed for him so much. I love my dad. He's awesome, and he's my buddy. He's my buddy now, and I love him. And I just look back at his journey, and as an adult, I can see where things were hard for him, or as a teenager, you don't have the bandwidth to recognize with empathy why your father is struggling. But now I look back on that and I appreciate so much of who he is, because he's had to fight for his faith, and he's had to fight to reestablish the culture of our household. So my dad has always been a really successful man. He's in sales, he's awesome, and I think part of his identity as a father got wrapped up into how can I provide financially. And he didn't realize that what we needed from him, yes, was the financial support, but what we needed more was him to be present with us and to be there at the activities and to have fun with us and to do all of that. And it was actually going to a Promise Keepers event that kind of triggered, flipped the switch, planted a seed, however you want to say it, on this journey of him building an authentic relationship with Christ, which translated into an authentic relationship with our family. So it was, as he would describe it, a breaking down of his pride, and him realizing, I have a responsibility as a father to be spiritually present in my own home, not just to play church, but to be there and to lead my family, and that my actions are something that my family pays attention to. They don't just like take the check and run. That's never what we've wanted from him. But we notice his character, and we notice when his heart is broken or not, if that makes sense. And so after going to Promise Keepers and kind of realizing that God did a lot of work on him over a number of years, and he was a pretty heavy drinker, workaholic, and just didn't have freedom. And as God broke down those walls and he felt like, I do have this responsibility to lead in my home, that's when we had our first family Bible study. And it was when I was 19. So
you were 19 before you ever studied the Bible with your dad?
Yes. So when I think about, is it too late? It is not too late. It was late, but it wasn't too late. And the first time we did it, because he's like, we're doing this, you guys, I want to give this a shot. And it was really precious, because you could tell that he wanted to reestablish something that he felt like he'd missed out on, and he wasn't just gonna say, it's too late for me. And so we all gathered around, and it was uncomfortable because we had never stepped into that space with one another, but it opened up a door to conversations that we'd never had. And now, years later, it is kind of a norm to have spiritual conversations and to talk about faith. And the times when I respect my dad the most, and this is so against what every man thinks, is when he shows what he would believe is a sign of weakness. He has to be strong. He has to be brave and courageous, which I know are values of his. But when I see my dad being strong is when he says, hey, I'm having a hard time. And then he puts his faith in the Lord anyway, you know, or I'm having a hard time and he shows up and he loves my mom anyway. Those are the times when I respect my dad the most, not when he just pretends that everything's fine. Does that make sense?
You were in college at 19?
Yeah.
So you're in college when suddenly this guy who's never taken a lot of big role in your life or
Yeah.
been a spiritual leader sits you down, and you accepted him despite the awkwardness of it because he was vulnerable and authentic with you. That's what I heard you say?
And because we had watched him change for a number of years. So he stopped drinking somewhere along in high school, and that was kind of the breaking point of his pride. God had to break that in him. And he picked up marathoning, and he every day since then wakes up at 4:30 in the morning. I know, 4:30 is way too early. 4:30 in the morning to read his Bible and run before work, all before 7:30. And God's used that time on the road, running marathons. I think he's almost done with all 50 states.
Wow.
Yeah. So he has just grown, and he said, I wish that men would step into uncomfortable spaces, because it was uncomfortable for him to sit our family down and say, I'm going to do this. But he felt uncomfortable. Like, how is my family going to receive this?
He picked up the mantle of being a dad and did it.
Right. Even if he felt like he wasn't sure how we were going to respond.
So you just got married.
I did.
You waited for your husband for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know your husband.
Yeah.
And God gave you a really good one.
I know, I got a good one.
So what would you say to girls out there about waiting for their husband?
Yeah. I would say, I think as women, we have this core desire for approval and to be chosen, if I were to say that, to be chosen. And so sometimes, a lot of times, all throughout life, we just step in and we're like, choose me, choose me, choose me, because you're cute or you're popular or whatever, but please choose me. And you adjust all of these things about yourself to be chosen by the guy, when in reality, you've already been chosen by Christ. So you can just let that part go. And one of the things that has been a game changer for me, and I hope that girls hear this, is there's a difference in the way that men speak. And something that John said that was like, oh, somebody who's chasing after God actually thinks this way. He had said, when we get to heaven, and we're married now, but when we get to heaven, I want to be part of your well done moment. I want to stand at the side when you come in and just celebrate knowing that I was part of helping you have that moment with Jesus. Well done, my good and faithful servant. And it wasn't a how can you serve me, but a I want to elevate and uphold you, which is completely different language than you hear from a lot of young adult men.
So reversing the question, because you kind of
Yes.
already answered it, but guys out there who are saying, man, I really want to be married, you know, I'm trying to find a godly woman, what would you say to those guys?
Yeah. I would say to those guys, and this goes both ways, so if you are looking for a godly woman, someone to come alongside you, partner really well with you, are you the type of man that that woman wants to follow? Because respectable men, honorable men, women naturally want to follow that. We do. And so when you enter into a dating relationship, you're always training yourself towards something. So even in high school, and John and I would tell our students this when we taught together, you are practicing behavior now that will be how you treat your family, how you treat your wife. And so how do you perceive even your high school girlfriend? How do you perceive your college girlfriend? And I know that guys sometimes, the same way that girls do, wonder, are there good girls out there? Are there good guys out there? It goes both ways, and there absolutely are. And that goes to that patience and trust that, does God have what's best for me? And am I willing to wait for that, you know, and be patient within it?
So you talked about two powerful male influences in your life. You talked about your dad who went through a change, and you basically said that whole change was about God breaking his pride, about humbling himself, brought his whole family around him and changed who he is. And you talked about your husband who you had to wait for, and who it sounds like his message to you was, I want to present you to Jesus Christ as my bride, right, with pride. Is there a part of that whole story that's come together that makes you want to know God more? How have your story, or those two guys, how have they helped you to want to know God in a deeper way?
Yeah. Both of those men, my husband and my dad, would never claim that they're perfect. And they would never say, I've done it right every step of the way, yet they have humbled themselves to say, God, take control of my entire life, every aspect, and redeem my story, redeem my past. And as a woman, a young woman looking in on those stories, I respect that so deeply. Because men don't have to do that. It's really easy in our culture to just be like, oh, I am man and I'm strong. But there is this tender humility that comes along with really strong leadership. And so when I see that in my dad, when I see that in my husband, I'm like, yes, I want to be part of that story too. So I want to be part of that story in my family alongside my dad. And I want to be part of that story with John as we raise our kids. And so those two really have inspired me to know God deeper and more relationally, because I've seen what it can do to a family.
So you've taught high school kids.
I have.
And I know some of those kids you've taught.
Do you
because
know
my
one?
sons are two of them.
Yes, I did teach your son. He's a good kid.
And so when you look at these kids today coming up, and it's so different than when I was a kid,
Yeah.
you see this Me Too movement, you see sort of this, a lot of angry women out there, and I think a lot of them have a right to be angry.
Yeah.
What do you tell these young women and these young men who are trying to exude Christ, and yet there's just such conflicting messages out there, especially around young men being humble leaders of their household, when they see all these mixed messages? So what do you say to those high school kids?
Yeah. That is a great question, because in our culture right now, they get conflicting messages from every single angle. In their house, they might hear one thing. In their friend group, they'll hear another. At youth group, they'll hear another. And then in the midst of it all is, maybe I want a relationship with Christ, but how do these stories fit together? How do they? And that is something that when I look at just the gospel and the simplicity of what it teaches us, that's what I would break it down to, is just truth and wisdom. And so are we taking the steps necessary to filter what we're hearing and what we're ingesting and what we're choosing to believe? And then how are we saying, in the midst of my current cultural climate, because high school itself is its own little like social hierarchy and its own little mini subculture, all of it. So when it comes down to it, what we talk about with the kids is, especially within relationship, is how do you honor and respect one another? Because like I had said, men who are good men, because a lot of the conversation too in culture right now is toxic masculinity, and men who do not know how to humble themselves before the Lord and how to honestly respect a woman. Those are the men that hurt women, and that's where women respond. Or when men don't know how to step up and lead appropriately, that's where the women have to step in to lead. And as much as women know that we play a role in this story, at the end of the day, and this is for sure true for me, we want to be with a man who we respect and who we feel is not worthy of following, because at the end of the day, every single one of us needs redemption and saving, but somebody who has enough leadership and tender-hearted care to steward well. And that's something that we try to teach these boys and girls as they're working together, and then the women to be respectable women who can actually understand the heart of a man and understand where he's coming from too. You know, the guys have to understand this is how a girl thinks and that need to be wanted, and then men have this desire to be respected. And neither of those things just happen on their own. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So it's a lot, and we've talked to the guys too. There have been moments where I'm like, you're training these girls, you are training them into how to perceive guys. And so the actions that you take right now as a high school boy in this class, you're training a girl what's appropriate, what her expectation should be, how she is to respond, and that happens now at 15, 16, 17, 18. It doesn't just happen when we're adults. So that's something that we've seen the guys be like, oh, yeah, I do have leadership. My actions do matter. I do want to take care of these girls, and they all of a sudden become these like protectors. But then when the girls are crying, they're like, okay, I'll sit with you and hear your feelings. It's so funny to watch them learn how to perceive women, if that makes sense. And your son has been awesome at that, and I'm proud of him.
Well, thanks for doing a great job with it. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to get out of this very low couch.
You can do it.